This is Alan, and today's instalment all about Alan will be tantalising by design, mostly because it poses questions and finds issues and doesn't yet solve any of them. We'll start with the perimeter of steel and rubber fender that connects upper and lower fiberglass shell together. Back in the winter I had to clean up and repair a small section of it. Whilst at sea last month, and especially when thumping into steep waves on the bow, I noticed something, and for more I'll hand over to real Alex in this part of Alan's cabin. Hello people. Right, we're up towards Alan's bow right now, and you can see that we've got some cladding here on the walls of the inside. And what we have is the top shell of the boat here and the lower shell here. This is that double skin fiberglass from the original build. And in between, of course, there's lots of insulating and buoyancy foam. Now, they are bolted together using a load of galvanized steel on the outside of the shell with lots and lots of through bolts. And to basically keep everything looking neat inside here, they've hidden all of those bolt ends and then a load of overglassing behind some of these panels. And on the last trip, particularly as we were coming into the fourth, I noticed that there were some little drips, not a great deal of water flow, but little drips sort of appearing around here-ish. And I thought maybe there was some water getting in through the front hatch that was then sort of, because we were pitching quite a bit, just rolling and dripping all the way down the boat. But I couldn't find a route for it to do so. And there were areas that were in the middle that were dry, so that hypothesis didn't really follow through. So I thought the water's going to be coming from somewhere, and it wasn't condensation because it was salt water. And so I thought, are we getting a bit of a leak from where the two shells join? And it's not something I've worried about before. I'd actually done an epoxy coat by spraying it behind the fender on the outside before, and I hoped that that would stop any minor water ingress. But clearly something was going on. So what I'm going to do, I've taken out most of the screws, but I'll just take out these final ones here. Doing this one-handed is not that easy. There we are. First one. Second one. And what you'll see in here, behind this very thin layer of, this is just fiberglass cladding, what you've got is they've just stuffed in a load of closed cell foam. That's just kind of loose. And then behind, they've glassed in using just chopped strand mat fairly roughly, because it's not really going to be client facing. No one's going to argue if it's not pretty. This one here is alright, this one seems dry, but then if you look at that one and that one, both are slightly discoloured, and they're just, yeah, they're tacky. It's as if, whilst they're not sopping wet or anything, it's like there's definitely some moisture that's been there recently, and it's caused the resin to go a little bit gummy, like it was, almost like it's not quite cured properly. But I doubt that's the case. It's a fairly hodgepodge job they've done in here, because obviously no one normally would see. But I'm pretty sure that Charlie, and I may not be taking too much of a liberty here in guessing what Charlie will think. Charlie is one of our new Wonderment members, and I do not think he would approve of this. Neither do I. And what we do know, of course, is that if you get a very slow water ingress into a fiberglass laminate, it can damage it. Slowly, not dramatically. It won't just suddenly snap in half or fall to pieces, but it can start to, over time, reduce its strength. And I think that this sort of slight tackiness is a sign that water has been very slowly getting through. And particularly when we were taking big waves on the bow on the last trip, it might have been really forcing water in through what was a tiny little gap. Maybe just capillary action of water very slowly moving through the bolt threads. So I need to take some action. I can't really do much from within, because of course you need to solve all leaks from outside. I think I'm going to do a bit more of an investigation, particularly around the bow end panels, to see whether it was ever any worse around here and around there. And then there may be a case at some point this winter, it's a job I really don't look forward to remove the rubber fender strip and then completely reseal all of the galvanized steel banding, which is then all bolted through all the way around it. I guess the best way to call it is banding. There's a big strip of solid steel around the boat, and then reseal the whole thing. Make sure there's no corrosion to the steel. The parts that I've seen which are exposed, I haven't seen any corrosion. The zinc was still very much there. It hadn't de-zinced, but something's clearly happening, and this is where it's coming from. The method of rubber attachment seems to differ in the stern and bow, so I'll get this off soon and update you. Also, have you noticed the fouling line? As well as being rather low, it also suggests that perhaps when adding said ballast, we need to move more up front. Perhaps it'll help us punch through waves better. Next, some electrics. Something's been going on with my USB ports. These were some of the first installations I made, before I bought Alan off my expedition company to work on solo, and certainly before I began broadcasting to you lot. 6 independent 3-amp USB sockets driven by a 12-volt Victron DC converter, all separate so if one dies, the rest forge onward in their honourable duty to supply 5 volts to small devices. But really very space-consuming and messy. But much worse than that, the units aren't great. This clever little machine informs me that even without a load applied, we're not even at 5 volts, when the USB standard expects up to 5.2-ish. Then, when I try to fast charge my phone, a further voltage drop to around 4.8 volts, and barely half an amp flowing. It wasn't just that one, all but one were inconsistent and weird. I swapped out cables and other power sources, and checked that it wasn't my phone either, but they all showed much healthier numbers. My phone can charge above an amp, by the way, but it was nearly full, and I gather Apple throttles charging when nearly full and in older, tired batteries like mine. The demolition job begins then. Luckily, not much work was needed. The electrics panel is polyethylene sheet, and nothing really bonds to that. The USB sockets were set in a messy bed of solid, rather brittle, epoxy putty. The front hole was cleared now, so to the next job, removing all the little voltage regulators on the rear side of the panel and all their wires. This really will neaten up the area. I won't throw them out just yet. I'm intrigued about why they weren't playing ball, and so might test them with more devices and power sources. They evade the waste bin for now, but only for now. Also, this large bus bar was really wasted on just this one distribution point, so off it comes too. It's a rather fitting opportunity to figuratively tip my embroidered Allen baseball cap, newly restocked by the way, to one of our earliest channel members. Cheers. I've bolted on a new plate to cover over the messy, wide hole in the panel, and then am drilling 3 holes for the replacements. These are on order, and I'm confident you'll love them. Patience, people of Alan's channel. We'll jump outside once again to my introduction of one of the 2 big jobs for this winter. We all know that Alan is, even with ballast and supplies, still too buoyant, and with a very shallow keel that barely does anything to limit sideways motion at sea. These combine and means that Alan rolls a fair bit, but I can't dramatically modify the hull. Why? Alan will encounter sea ice, and the hull shape is currently excellent for surviving icy waters. This means my solution will need to be installed and removed periodically. Temporary things can often run the risk of not being very good, and herein lies my challenge. My working plan over the last year has been to install bilge keels, these sorts of things you find on tons of coastal boats that don't want a deep keel. But for Alan, they would not be bolted or bonded to the hull because of what I just said about the ice, otherwise they'll be crushed or snapped off. I also considered a centerboard. No. I considered an active gyro stabilizer system. Too expensive. There are all manner of clever new designs, mostly emerging from Scandinavia where everyone has lots and lots of money. This one uses a buoyant pod held underneath the boat and controlled in a sort of reverse pendulum manner. Very smart, but no. I've decided to create a pair of removable, bolt-on and bolt-off lee boards, a design sadly, and I feel wrongly, consigned to history. Basically 2 flat plates dropping down on either side of Alan that limit the rolling, and could even help keep him upright if we ever need to sit on a mud bottom at low tide, but they can also lift off and stow on deck when they could become a hazard. The various potential angles and construction methods are being honed into a design, and I'm seeing what all the other people in the boating world are coming up with. So, that's exciting. Before I leave you on this triple cliffhanger, I'll inject yet more jeopardy. Alan's current marina is home to not only Alan, but another much older relative. This lifeboat and its owner were doing a float and leak test before being approved for canal and river use. Did it sink? You'll have to guess. Oh, and Londoners, buy tickets for next month's event. Link in description. Bye.